The Delta variant first emerged in India last October, wreaking havoc before spreading across the globe. A mutated version of COVID, twice as transmissible as the original.
Delta variant is not like any variant we've seen. It is leaps and bounds faster in transmissibility, more contagious than any variant known to date. If we let the virus spread in the population, it will infect a lot of people, it will sicken a lot of people, it will kill a lot of people, and it will give long COVID to a lot of people. There is still lots of room for the virus to mutate. We want to stop transmission, stop the opportunistic chances for it to develop a mutation. The good news is that the vaccines do work against the Delta variant. It works pretty well, 94% efficacy against hospitalization.
Australia's obsession with every new COVID infection that's recorded here is turning us into a nation of neurotics. Surely it doesn't have to dominate every waking moment of our lives.
The Delta variant driving a new wave of cases across the U.S.
Health officials are reporting more than 100,000 infections per day for the first time since early October.
Researchers at the University of Hong Kong estimate that the Omicron virus could multiply 70 times faster in the bronchial tubes than the Delta variant.
Is there any data yet to show how effective our current vaccines are when it comes to Omicron?
All of the vaccines have shown some degree of cross-protection in terms of virus neutralizing antibodies. So I would expect the same will be true of Omicron.
The coronavirus seems to be back with a new variant, Deltacron. Labeled an offspring of the Delta and Omicron variants, Deltacron was first detected in mid-February when scientists at the Institut Pasteur in Paris examined a genetic sequence of the coronavirus that looked very different from existing ones. The virus sample had come from an elderly man in northern France. Most of its genetic sequence was the same as Delta's, which was dominant worldwide up until late last year. However, a part of the virus's spike protein came from Omicron. It's not unusual for viruses to mix and match parts of themselves. This is called recombination, as one virus combines parts of its genetic sequence with parts from another related virus as it assembles copies of itself. However, when there are two variants in circulation and both are infecting people, the chances of recombination increase. Recombination usually creates a new virus that isn't viable, as the mixing of different genes can interfere with the virus's ability to make the proteins it needs to survive. But sometimes one does survive, and that appears to be what's happened with Deltacron. Experts say the present vaccines should be effective against the new variant.
BA.2, also known as stealth Omicron, was first found back in December. It now accounts for more than 50% of new COVID cases in this country.
The cases are actually increasing both in Florida and across the United States right now.
Health officials say it's because of the BA.2 Omicron subvariant and its mutations that are going around.
This thing is now really vying with measles for the most infectious respiratory virus known to man.
The original Omicron variant caused a record number of COVID-19 cases in the beginning of the year. Researchers say the BA.2 subvariant has mutated a few times, increasing its infectiousness even more. The CDC estimates BA.2 and its mutation have accounted for about 93% of new COVID-19 cases in the U.S. just last week.
We've been hearing about BA.2. This, of course, is the newer form of Omicron that is more contagious than the previous form of Omicron. Now there's a new version of BA.2 called BA.2.12.1, and I really hope that gets a better name if it sticks around.
The new variant of COVID-19 has emerged. It's a cross between Omicron BA.1 and Omicron BA.2. Here to tell us more is Norman Swan, the host of the Health Report on RN and of the Chronicles podcast.
But essentially there's two ways for a new version of the virus to appear. One is mutation. So most of the variants we've had up till now, they're inside your body, they're multiplying, they make mistakes genetically as they're multiplying. Most of these mistakes don't mean anything, but occasionally there's a mistake which makes the virus more contagious. And then it spins off and becomes a variant of interest or a variant of concern. There's another way that it can happen. The coronavirus is actually quite a promiscuous virus. It likes getting together with other viruses and exchanging genetic material with other viruses. And this one is somebody's been infected with BA.1 and BA2 at the same time, they've got together and produced a new one. So over 65, the immunity has waned a fair bit by the time you've got to 4 or 5 months out, and it really is worth having. The Israeli data are really good on this, that it protects you against infection for a few weeks, not hugely, but it does give you some protection, and really boosts your immunity to severe disease.
Should we all have it at some point then, the 4th dose?
Over 50s should have it, because that's when your immune system starts to wane, and that's what the Americans have done. And I think what will happen is that it will creep down in age as time goes on.
A new COVID variant has now emerged. It's the XE variant.
It's the 2 subvariants of Omicron, so BA1 and BA2. And the idea is the viruses say to each other, oh, let me see what you got, let me see what you got. And they sort of swap their best genetic material to try to come up with a super virus variant. And we think, according to the WHO, that it's about 10% more transmissible or more contagious than the BA2 variant, which was already more contagious than the BA1, which is the Omicron, which was more contagious than the original. So every subsequent variant seems to be spreading a little bit easier. We have seen it in a number of different countries. We're seeing it in Asia, in Japan, in Thailand, in India. We've seen it in the UK. So it's just a matter of time before we have it here in the US.
Do our current vaccinations help fight against it?
We hope so. We don't actually know, but what we know about BA1 and BA2 is that both of those seem to respond to the vaccine, so we think that this one will as well. Now keep in mind that both BA1 and BA2 got smarter in the sense that they evaded our vaccines and our immune system. So we think that this one may have some degree of resistance to some other therapies like antibodies specifically. We're hoping that the antivirals will still work, those medications that prevent viral replication, but all of that remains to be seen. The more infections you have, the more variants you're going to have, the more recombination events you're going to have, and we're just worried that that next variant, whatever it might be, may be resistant to our vaccines altogether or resistant to our therapies.
What's your take on boosters in terms of mixing and matching?
Yes, so if you're eligible for a booster now, if you're over the age of 50, it is highly recommended by Dr. Coley, not so formally by the CDC, that you mix and match. And the idea is we've had 2 high-quality studies that have come out that have shown not just you get more antibodies, you get more T cells, but you also get different types of antibodies. So, for example, if you got Pfizer initially, you make an antibody that lives in your lymph nodes mostly. If you got Moderna initially, you make an antibody that lives in your nose and your mouth. So switching over to the other really helps to boost those different types of antibodies.
2 doses of vaccine are 57% effective in preventing hospitalizations if you're more than 6 months out, according to a CDC study. That jumps to 90% with a 3rd dose.
New data from the CDC revealing the Omicron subvariants are now responsible for more than 70% of new infections in the U.S.
Nationwide, cases of RSV are on the rise, combined with the worst flu season so far in over a decade. COVID cases are also up, nearly 50% since last week.
The formal name is XBB.1.5. The internet, though, is taken to calling it Kraken. XBB.1.5 has mutated to be able to better evade immunity than predecessor variants, according to Johns Hopkins University. That means you're more at risk of catching this variant, even if you've already been sick with previous Omicron strains, says the World Health Organization.
It does have a growth advantage above all of the other subvariants so far. We don't have any data on severity yet or on the clinical picture, but we also do not have an indication that severity has changed with XBB.1.5. But that is something that we are watching very closely through studies, experimental studies in the lab, but also in real-world data.
As variants have become more and more adept at transmission, meaning how strong they bind the respiratory cells, they, as part of that, mutate away from producing antibodies.
Omicron was predicted to be just the next variant in the process. Omicron has achieved a complex set of mutations that have achieved a really high-level goal. They've achieved very high levels of transmissibility and immune evasiveness, and it's going to be difficult for a totally new virus to replicate or improve on that combination of mutations. So we may be in a new chapter in the evolution of this virus. I believe that coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2 is here to stay. It may become one of the seasonal coronaviruses over time. It's difficult to tell. And whether we will need ongoing vaccination is also another thing that we need to address. It may become like influenza, where we do need yearly updates or updates every few years because the virus is changing so much.